Airport agent laughs at black woman's accent. Her $950 travel group pulled out overnight. Monique Harris had always been a woman who believed in planning and preparation. She had built her travel and event management company from the ground up, turning it into a powerhouse worth nearly $1 billion. Her company didn't just organize trips. It created experiences, managing everything from corporate retreats to international conferences with precision. Monique had spent years ensuring that her clients received the highest level of service, and she demanded the same from the people and businesses she worked with. Respect, professionalism, and efficiency were non-negotiable in her world. That morning, she arrived at the airport with a small team of her top managers. Their mission was clear: check in hundreds of tickets for an international business conference, review last-minute flight adjustments, and make sure that everything was running smoothly. It should have been a normal, routine day. But as Monique approached the check-in counter of a well-known airline, she could feel a subtle tension in the air, the kind that often preceded something unexpected. She greeted the airline agent warmly, explaining her itinerary in a calm, professional tone. Monique's voice carried a slight accent, reflecting the city where she had grown up and the community she had always been proud to represent. Her words were precise, her instructions clear, and yet the response she received was not professional. It was startling. The agent smirked, glanced at her paperwork, and then, in front of several waiting passengers, let out a laugh. "Excuse me," Monique said politely, maintaining her composure. "I'm here to check in a large group. Can you help us?" The agent, still chuckling, shook his head slightly and said something that made Monique's chest tighten. "I can barely understand your accent." "Are you sure you know what you're asking for?" For a moment, Monique was stunned. The laughter from the agent was sharp, cutting through the usual hum of the airport. Other passengers turned to look, some with curiosity, some with discomfort. Monique felt her face flush, not out of embarrassment, but out of a mix of shock and indignation. She had faced challenges in business before, but she had never experienced such a blatant dismissal in a professional setting, and certainly not because of the way she spoke. She reminded herself to stay calm. Monique had learned over the years that reacting impulsively often caused more harm than good. She smiled politely, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm confident that you can help," she said firmly. "We have a lot of people to check in, and it's important that we get this done efficiently." The agent shrugged and continued typing at his computer, but the laughter lingered in the air, like a shadow over the counter. Monique noticed a few of her team members exchanging uneasy glances. They had seen her handle difficult situations before, but they also knew that this was different. This wasn't a delayed flight or a technical error. This was a personal affront. The agent's behavior was disrespectful, and it was happening in front of strangers. Monique took a deep breath and reminded herself of her company's mission and values. She had always taught her employees to handle challenges with dignity, but she also knew that there were lines that should never be crossed. Disrespect was one of them. "Sir," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I am asking for assistance and I expect professional treatment. If you cannot provide that, please call a supervisor so we can resolve this quickly." The agent hesitated, clearly caught off guard by her assertiveness. He muttered something under his breath and made a half-hearted attempt to continue processing the check-in. But Monique could tell that the attitude had not changed. The laughter, the smirk, the dismissive glances, they all lingered. Monique decided not to let the moment consume her. She completed the check-in process as efficiently as possible, ensuring that every ticket, every boarding pass, and every special request was accounted for. Her team followed her lead, maintaining professionalism despite the tension. Yet, the incident left a mark. Monique knew that this was not just a small inconvenience. It was a reflection of how some people underestimated her and her team, perhaps even the industry she represented. As she moved away from the counter, Monique glanced around the terminal. Passengers were returning to their routines, some scrolling through their phones, some sipping coffee. A few had noticed what had happened, and she caught brief, sympathetic glances from strangers who seemed to understand that something unfair had occurred. Monique felt a mix of emotions: disappointment, frustration, and a spark of determination. She stepped aside with her assistant, reviewing the group itinerary one last time before heading to security. "We'll need to be extra careful about how we handle our partnerships moving forward," she said quietly. Her assistant nodded, understanding that this incident, though seemingly small, could have far-reaching consequences. Monique's mind was already racing with questions. How could a major airline, one that handled some of the largest corporate accounts in the country, allow such behavior? How could someone in a position of responsibility act with such blatant disregard for respect and professionalism? She knew that addressing this would require more than just a complaint. It would require action, a decision that aligned with her values and the reputation of her company. By the time Monique and her team cleared security and made their way to the waiting lounge, she had made up her mind. This incident was not something to ignore. Her company had built its reputation on integrity, trust, and exceptional service. If the people they partnered with could not uphold the same standards, there would be consequences. Sitting in the lounge, Monique took a moment to reflect. She had faced many challenges as an entrepreneur, tight deadlines, high-stakes negotiations, and difficult clients. But this felt different. This was personal and public. It was a reminder that even in a world of success, one could still face disrespect simply for being who they were. But Monique also recognized that she had an opportunity here. She could let this moment pass, or she could turn it into a statement of accountability, demonstrating that her company would not tolerate disrespect or discrimination in any form. Her team, sensing her resolve, began discussing logistics for the trip ahead, but Monique's mind remained partly on the incident at the counter. She knew that the next steps would require careful planning. Filing a complaint alone would not suffice. She needed a response that conveyed both the seriousness of the situation and the standards her company expected. As the boarding time approached, Monique stood up and looked around the terminal one more time. She saw families, business travelers, and tourists, all navigating the airport with their own concerns. But for Monique, the incident at the check-in counter had crystallized something important. Respect in business was non-negotiable, and professionalism was something that should never be compromised, regardless of who you were speaking to or the circumstances. By the time her flight took off, Monique had already begun drafting ideas for how she would address the situation with the airline's management. She planned to highlight the incident clearly, explain its impact on her company, and emphasize the broader implications for customer service standards. Her resolve was firm. This was not just about one unpleasant encounter. It was about holding people accountable and setting a precedent for how her company would operate in the future. As the plane ascended above the clouds, Monique reflected on her journey as a business leader. She had built her empire through perseverance, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to her values. And now, in a moment that could have been simply humiliating, she found a renewed sense of purpose. The incident at the airport, though small in scale, had ignited a determination that she knew would influence not just her company, but potentially the broader business world. Monique closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the steps she would take once she returned. She would communicate clearly, act decisively, and ensure that her company's standards were upheld. But she also understood the emotional impact of the encounter. Even the strongest leaders could feel the sting of disrespect, and acknowledging that was part of what made her response authentic and powerful. By the time the flight landed, Monique was no longer just a passenger who had been laughed at. She was a leader ready to turn an uncomfortable moment into a lesson in accountability, respect, and corporate responsibility. Her team looked to her for guidance, and she knew that how she handled this situation would set the tone for every future interaction her company had. And so, what began as a brief, humiliating encounter at an airport check-in counter became a pivotal moment, a test of character, a call to action, and the beginning of a story that would demonstrate the power of standing firm in the face of disrespect, no matter how intimidating. The circumstances. Monique Harris, a woman who had faced countless challenges in her life, now faced this one with clarity and resolve, ready to transform a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for change. Monique Harris returned from the flight with a clear mind and a renewed sense of purpose. As soon as she landed, she made her way to her company's headquarters. The sleek glass building reflected the morning sun, a symbol of the empire she had worked tirelessly to build. Her team was waiting, ready to brief her on the upcoming conference and the logistics involved. But Monique's thoughts were still partially on the incident at the airport. She knew that it was not just a personal affront, It could have larger implications for her company and the way it conducted business. She entered the conference room, her presence commanding attention. Her team greeted her with professional smiles, but they sensed the seriousness in her expression. Monique took a seat at the head of the table, laid out the documents from her trip, and took a deep breath. She knew she had to act carefully, strategically, and with conviction. This was not a moment for impulsive decisions. It was a moment to demonstrate leadership, values, and the standards her company upheld. "Before we review the itinerary for the conference," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I need to discuss an incident that occurred at the airport." The room grew quiet. Everyone knew that Monique rarely expressed personal frustration, and when she did, it signaled something serious. She explained the situation in detail, the dismissive attitude of the airline agent, the laughter, the disrespect, and the impact it had on her and the team. She spoke about how it was not just about a single encounter, but about the principle of respect and professionalism, which was essential to how her company operated. Her assistant, who had been with her for years, nodded in agreement. "It was shocking to watch, but I think we all understand how serious this is," she said. Monique continued. "We spend millions every year on travel and logistics. This is not just about money, it's about the trust and respect that our partners show us. If one of our partners fails to meet those standards, we need to reconsider our relationship." The team listened intently. They understood the weight of her words. Monique was not one to make threats lightly. Her company's contracts were substantial, and her decisions could influence the operations of major corporations. The airline in question handled hundreds of corporate accounts, and losing a company like Monique's could have a significant financial impact. But the team also understood that Monique valued integrity and dignity over profit. After a short pause, Monique's assistant brought out a tablet. "Monique, some of our team members have already shared the incident on social media. It's gaining attention," she said, scrolling through posts. Monique leaned in. The posts were respectful and factual, describing what had happened at the airport. Within hours, they had been shared thousands of times. People were expressing support for her, condemning the airline's behavior, and discussing the importance of respectful customer service. Monique realized that the incident had struck a chord beyond her own experience. Many people had likely faced similar situations but had not spoken out. "This is bigger than I expected," Monique said quietly. "People are noticing and they are paying attention. This is not just our company, this is about standards in the industry." Her team nodded, understanding that this was an opportunity to make a meaningful statement. Monique instructed her executive assistant to draft a formal letter to the airline's headquarters. The letter would clearly outline the incident, its impact on her company, and the expectations for accountability and professional conduct. It would not be aggressive or confrontational, but firm and factual, leaving no room for misunderstanding. While the letter was being drafted, Monique turned her attention to the social media posts. She decided to respond personally, thanking people for their support and emphasizing the importance of respect, equity, and dignity in business interactions. Her post was simple but powerful, a clear statement that no one should be dismissed or laughed at because of the way they spoke or who they were. As the day progressed, the situation began to gain traction in local news outlets. Journalists reached out for statements, interested in the story of a high-profile business leader standing up against disrespect in corporate settings. Monique agreed to give a few interviews, carefully ensuring her message was clear. This was not about retaliation, but about holding companies accountable for how they treated their partners. She wanted to highlight the importance of values over convenience, and the response she received was overwhelmingly supportive. Meanwhile, internally, Monique gathered her executive board via video conference. The discussion focused on potential outcomes and next steps. They reviewed the company's contracts with the airline, the financial implications of terminating future partnerships, and the broader message it would send to the industry. Monique listened carefully to input from her team, weighing every factor. After a thoughtful discussion, she made a decisive announcement. "Effective immediately, our company will pause all future travel contracts with this airline until they demonstrate accountability and proper training for their staff. We will explore alternative partners who align with our values and can provide the level of respect and professionalism we expect." The team reacted with a mixture of surprise and admiration. It was a bold move, especially considering the size and influence of the airline, but Monique's leadership had always been defined by courage and principles. She explained that this decision was not punitive in nature. It was about ensuring that her company partnered only with organizations that upheld the standards of dignity and respect they required. Over the next few days, Monique and her team worked tirelessly. The airline eventually contacted her directly, offering apologies and explaining that the behavior of the agent did not reflect company policy. They promised diversity and sensitivity training, and they asked for a meeting to discuss reconciliation. Monique listened, but she remained cautious. Words alone were not enough. Action and results were what mattered. As news of the incident spread, Monique began receiving messages from other business leaders and organizations. Many shared their own experiences of disrespect in corporate settings and praised her for standing up publicly. The conversation shifted from a personal incident to a larger discussion about workplace ethics, customer service, and accountability. Monique realized that her response was inspiring a movement of sorts, a call for businesses to prioritize respect alongside profitability. Internally, Monique used the opportunity to reinforce her company's culture. She held team meetings to discuss the incident and its implications. She emphasized that respect and integrity were non-negotiable and encouraged employees to speak up if they encountered similar challenges in their work. This strengthened the sense of unity and purpose within her company, reminding everyone that their collective success relied not just on business skills, but also on ethical leadership. As the situation developed, Monique also began reflecting on the broader lessons. She understood that while she could not control the behavior of others, she could control her response. By choosing to act decisively, she had turned an uncomfortable and humiliating moment into a powerful example of leadership and values-driven decision-making. She was not just protecting her company's financial interests. She was sending a message about what was acceptable in professional interactions. The airline's public response, though polite and corrective, could not immediately erase the impression left by the incident. Monique recognized that trust needed to be earned, and actions mattered more than words. She and her executive team began researching alternative airlines and travel partners who could meet their needs without compromising on professional standards. This required careful analysis, negotiation, and planning, but Monique was determined to ensure that her company would never face a similar situation again. By the end of the week, Monique had successfully navigated the complex interplay of personal dignity, corporate responsibility, and public perception. She had transformed what could have been a moment of embarrassment into a catalyst for meaningful change and reflection. Her team admired her clarity of purpose, and her peers began discussing the incident as an example of ethical leadership under pressure. Monique's experience also sparked conversations about inclusivity and diversity in the broader business community. Articles and editorials praised her approach, noting that she had demonstrated how leaders could respond to discrimination without compromising professionalism. Monique herself became an advocate for respectful business practices, sharing insights with other executives and speaking at conferences about the importance of values-driven partnerships. Through it all, Monique remained grounded. She understood that success was not just measured in dollars or contracts, but in the integrity of the decisions she made and the respect she demanded for herself and her team. The incident at the airport, though unfortunate, had become a turning point, reinforcing her commitment to fairness, accountability, and ethical leadership. As Part 2 concluded, Monique had established a strong foundation for the next steps. The airline incident had catalyzed immediate action. Social media awareness, public discussion, internal reflection, and strategic corporate decisions. She had shown that one person, acting decisively and with integrity, could influence not only her company, but also spark broader conversations about respect, professionalism, and ethical conduct in the corporate world. Monique's story was no longer just about an airline incident. It was about the power of standing up for dignity, the importance of values in business, and the courage to act when faced with disrespect. Her team, inspired by her leadership, was ready to move forward with renewed focus, ensuring that every future partnership reflected the principles Monique had fought to uphold. Monique Harris sat in her office late that evening, the city lights reflecting softly off the glass. Was The airport incident and its immediate aftermath were still fresh in her mind, but she knew this was far from over. While social media attention had grown and her team had rallied behind her, she understood that words alone were not enough. Her company's future partnerships and reputation were at stake. More importantly, she wanted to set a clear standard for how her business operated. No disrespect would be tolerated, no matter how small the incident appeared to outsiders. The next morning, Monique called an urgent meeting with her executive board. The discussion was strategic and thorough. Every detail was reviewed: the airline's behavior, the potential financial impact of terminating contracts, the logistics of moving travel arrangements, and the possible public response. Some members of the board expressed concern. After all, the airline handled millions of dollars in corporate bookings, and pulling out could create temporary disruptions. But Monique was firm. "This is not about inconvenience," she explained, her voice steady but commanding. "This is about integrity. We will not work with any partner who disrespects our team, our clients, or our company. Our reputation is built on values, not convenience or cost savings. If they cannot meet our standards, we have no reason to continue this relationship." Her words set the tone for the meeting. The room was filled with a quiet determination, mixed with the respect that Monique had earned over the years. She outlined a clear plan. All future bookings with the airline would be suspended immediately, and alternative travel partners would be identified and evaluated over the next few weeks. She emphasized that this decision, though difficult, was essential for upholding the principles her company stood for. After the meeting, Monique worked closely with her assistant to draft a formal notice to the airline. The letter was professional, concise, and firm. It acknowledged the apology the airline had offered, but made it clear that words alone were not enough. Monique requested a detailed plan for accountability and staff training, along with evidence of concrete actions to ensure that no other client would face similar disrespect. She set a deadline for the airline to respond, signaling that her company valued action over promises. Within hours of sending the letter, Monique received a call from a senior executive at the airline. They apologized again, emphasizing that the behavior of the agent did not reflect company policy. They asked for a meeting to discuss reconciliation. Monique listened carefully, but she did not make any commitments. She wanted to see real, measurable change before considering future collaboration. Meanwhile, the story continued to gain traction online. Business blogs, news outlets, and social media users picked up the narrative. The headline was clear: a successful African-American entrepreneur had taken a stand against disrespectful treatment by a major airline. Readers across the country commented on the post, sharing similar experiences and praising Monique for her courage. Many noted that it was rare for a leader of such a large company to act decisively in response to discrimination, instead of quietly accepting the incident and moving on. Monique's team monitored the reactions closely. The positive response inspired them, reinforcing the idea that standing up for values resonated with people, not just within their industry, but also with the general public. Her assistant compiled reports of mentions, shares, and supportive messages, showing that the story had reached thousands of people within a day. This visibility added pressure on the airline to respond meaningfully, but it also highlighted Monique's influence and the strength of her company's principles. In the following days, Monique and her executive board carefully reviewed their contracts with the airline. They examined each upcoming trip, analyzing the financial implications and assessing alternative arrangements. The process was meticulous, but Monique insisted on accuracy. She wanted to ensure that her company could continue its operations smoothly, even while sending a strong message about respect and accountability. Once alternative travel partners were identified, Monique met with their representatives. She clearly outlined her expectations: professionalism, reliability, and above all, respect for every client, regardless of background or appearance. These meetings were not just logistical, they were a reaffirmation of her company's values-driven approach. Monique wanted to ensure that every person her team and clients interacted with would understand the standards they upheld. As the company transitioned away from the airline, Monique also took steps to leverage the incident as a teaching moment. She organized workshops for her team to discuss ethical leadership, the importance of speaking up, and strategies for addressing discrimination professionally. She emphasized that while success in business often required negotiation and compromise, certain principles were non-negotiable. Respect, integrity, and dignity were at the core of her company's culture, and every employee was responsible for upholding them. Monique also engaged with industry peers, using the incident as a conversation starter. She participated in virtual panels and interviews, discussing how corporate leaders could create environments where respect was prioritized and where employees and clients were treated with fairness. Her approach was thoughtful, measured, and strategic. She did not vilify the airline but highlighted the need for accountability and ethical standards. As weeks passed, the airline began implementing changes. They conducted training programs for staff, emphasizing diversity, sensitivity, and professional conduct. While Monique monitored the progress closely, she remained cautious. Words were easy, actions were harder to maintain consistently. She continued to focus on her company's operations, ensuring that all travel and business activities proceeded without disruption. The public reaction remained overwhelmingly supportive. News outlets reported on Monique's decision to pull her company's contracts, framing it as a bold and principled move. Commentators highlighted that the decision was financially significant, yet it underscored the importance of values over profit. Readers expressed admiration for Monique's leadership, noting that her actions could inspire broader change in corporate America. Internally, Monique noticed a shift in her company's culture. Employees who may have previously hesitated to speak up began sharing concerns more openly. They felt empowered, knowing that their leader was willing to take a stand for fairness and dignity, even when it involved complex business decisions. Monique recognized that this cultural shift was perhaps the most important outcome of the incident, one that would strengthen her company for years to come. Monique also reflected on her personal growth through the experience. She realized that even highly successful leaders were not immune to moments of disrespect. What mattered was how they responded. She had chosen to act decisively, ethically, and strategically, and the results had reinforced the idea that integrity and courage could coexist with business acumen. In addition, the incident sparked broader discussions about corporate responsibility in her professional network. Leaders began asking for advice on how to handle similar situations and how to implement policies that ensured respect and fairness. Monique shared her insights, emphasizing that accountability starts at the top, and that companies must create cultures where employees and clients are never subjected to dismissive or discriminatory behavior. Meanwhile, the airline continued to make public statements about its commitment to better service, acknowledging the incident and outlining plans for ongoing training. While Monique remained cautious, she acknowledged that change could be possible. Yet she also made it clear to her team and clients that future partnerships would be based on actions, not promises. The lesson was clear. Accountability must be measurable, consistent, and transparent. By the end of Part 3, Monique's decision to pull out contracts had solidified her company's position as a leader in ethical business practices. The incident had transformed from a personal affront into a story of resilience, integrity, and strategic leadership. It had shown that standing up for dignity could coexist with sound business decisions, and that leaders could influence both their industry and the broader conversation about respect and professionalism. Her team was inspired, her clients were reassured, and the public took notice. Monique had turned a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for meaningful action, reinforcing the importance of values in every business decision. The story was no longer just about an airport incident. It had become a lesson in courage, accountability, and leadership. Monique Harris had proven that one decisive action, guided by principle and executed strategically, could ripple far beyond the initial moment, affecting her company, her industry, and the way people thought about respect and professionalism in business. She had shown that success was not just measured in revenue, but in the integrity and values that shaped every decision. As she looked ahead, Monique knew that challenges would continue to arise. But she was confident that her company was stronger, her team more united, and her leadership more respected than ever. The airport incident, once a source of frustration, had become a defining moment, a story of courage, strategy, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right, not what was easy. The long-term effects of her decision. The incident at the airport, which had initially felt like a personal affront, had evolved into something much larger, a defining moment for her company, her team, and even the industry. She sat in her office early one morning, reviewing reports from her executive team, social media reactions, and feedback from clients. It was clear that the decision to pull all contracts with the airline had resonated far beyond the immediate situation. Clients began reaching out to her personally, expressing support and admiration. Many shared similar experiences of disrespect in corporate interactions, and they appreciated Monique's courage in taking a public stand against unfair treatment. Some clients even mentioned that the way she handled the incident had reinforced their trust in her company, proving that Monique's leadership went beyond profits and efficiency. It also reflected integrity and values. Internally, the effect was equally profound. Monique's employees felt a renewed sense of pride in their work. They had seen their leader take a principled stand and prioritize dignity and respect over convenience or financial gain. Workshops, discussions, and team meetings focused on the lessons learned from the incident, and employees were encouraged to apply these principles in their own interactions with clients, partners, and vendors. Monique emphasized that ethical behavior and professionalism were non-negotiable, and her team absorbed the message wholeheartedly. Meanwhile, the airline continued to implement changes in response to the public scrutiny and Monique's decision. They launched staff training programs on diversity, sensitivity, and professional conduct. While Monique remained cautious, she acknowledged that progress was being made. Her response had not been about punishment. It had been about accountability, and the visible actions taken by the airline suggested that her message had been heard. She monitored the changes carefully, ensuring that the promises translated into consistent actions. Public recognition followed soon after. Business media outlets highlighted Monique's story, praising her for standing up for principles in a high-stakes corporate environment. Editorials discussed the broader implications, emphasizing how leaders could influence corporate culture and industry standards through decisive, values-driven action. Monique became a point of reference for ethical leadership, someone who demonstrated that courage and professionalism could coexist, even when confronting large, powerful organizations. Monique also reflected on the personal lessons she had gained from the experience. She realized that leadership was not only about making smart business decisions. It was also about standing firm in the face of disrespect and setting an example for others. Her confidence grew, not because she had faced a challenge successfully, but because she had acted in alignment with her values and remained true to her principles under pressure. She shared her insights at conferences and business forums, emphasizing that corporate leaders must create environments where employees, clients, and partners are treated with respect at all times. Monique encouraged other executives to establish clear standards, implement training programs, and hold teams accountable for behavior that did not meet professional and ethical expectations. Her story became a case study in leadership programs, demonstrating the power of combining strategy with integrity. The impact on Monique's company was also tangible. By switching to alternative travel partners who shared the company's values, operations ran smoothly and efficiently. The new partners demonstrated professionalism and respect, reinforcing the importance of choosing collaborations carefully. The experience strengthened Monique's company culture, ensuring that her team would continue to uphold high ethical standards in every interaction. Monique also found that the incident had sparked broader conversations within the industry. Other companies began reevaluating their own partnerships and training programs, recognizing that clients valued respect, integrity, and accountability. By taking a stand, Monique had indirectly influenced industry-wide change, showing that a single principled action could ripple across a sector and inspire meaningful improvements. As months passed, Monique and her team continued to monitor the airline's progress. While they maintained their decision to pause contracts, they remained open to future collaboration if the airline consistently demonstrated accountability and adherence to professional standards. This approach balanced firmness with fairness, showing that Monique's leadership was principled but pragmatic. Her team admired this balance, recognizing that courage did not require rigidity. It required discernment and strategic thinking. Monique also made it a priority to celebrate the positive outcomes with her employees. She held a company-wide meeting to acknowledge their hard work, resilience, and dedication throughout the incident. She emphasized that their collective efforts had helped turn a negative moment into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and strengthened reputation. The recognition reinforced morale and reminded the team that their company valued ethical leadership as much as operational excellence. In addition to internal recognition, Monique began receiving invitations to speak publicly on ethics, corporate responsibility, and leadership. She shared her experience, explaining how one moment of disrespect could be transformed into a lesson for an entire organization. Her story inspired others to consider how they would respond in similar situations, encouraging a culture where dignity, respect, and integrity were prioritized alongside business success. Monique also took time for personal reflection. She realized that while the incident had been challenging, it had also highlighted her strengths as a leader. She had remained calm under pressure, made strategic decisions, and maintained her values throughout. More importantly, she had demonstrated to her team, clients, and peers that standing up for what is right is never a weakness. It is a hallmark of true leadership. The long-term impact of the incident became even more evident as her company continued to thrive. Clients who valued professionalism and ethical practices strengthened their loyalty, while new partnerships were formed with companies who shared similar standards. Monique's company had not only protected its reputation, but had also attracted partners who respected and aligned with its core principles. Monique also reflected on the broader social implications. The story had sparked important conversations about respect, professionalism, and diversity in corporate environments. By taking action, she had encouraged dialogue and awareness, demonstrating that individual actions could contribute to meaningful cultural change. Her leadership became an example of how ethics and business success could coexist, inspiring other leaders to act decisively when confronted with unfair treatment. The experience ultimately strengthened Monique's vision for her company. She reinforced policies and training programs to ensure that every employee, partner, and client interaction upheld the highest standards of professionalism. She also emphasized the importance of courage, reminding her team that values-driven decisions were essential, even when faced with potential financial or logistical challenges. By the end of the year, Monique looked back on the incident with pride. What had begun as a humiliating encounter at an airport had become a defining moment for her company. It had strengthened her team, reinforced ethical standards, and elevated her reputation as a leader committed to principle over convenience. Monique's ability to turn adversity into opportunity had set a precedent for her company's culture, demonstrating that courage, integrity, and strategic thinking could create lasting, positive impact. In conversations with other business leaders, Monique emphasized that leadership was not measured only by profits or growth, but by how one responds to challenges that test character and values. She shared her story to inspire others, showing that even in difficult situations, principled action could lead to meaningful change, both within a company and across an industry. Monique Harris had taken what could have been a small, negative incident and transformed it into a powerful lesson in leadership, ethics, and resilience. She had protected her company's reputation, inspired her team, and sparked broader conversations about respect and accountability in the corporate world. Her actions demonstrated that true leadership requires courage, integrity, and a willingness to act decisively in the face of injustice. As the months continued, Monique's company operated with renewed focus and confidence. The lessons from the airport incident became embedded in the company culture. New hires were trained not only in technical skills, but also in the importance of respect, professionalism, and ethical decision-making. Monique's leadership had created an environment where values mattered as much as results, and her team thrived in that environment. Monique also realized that her personal experience could be shared beyond her immediate circle. She wrote articles, gave talks, and consulted with other businesses on how to navigate challenges ethically and strategically. Her story served as a blueprint for leaders facing similar situations, illustrating that standing firm on principles could coexist with business success. By the time the first anniversary of the incident approached, Monique reflected on how far she and her company had come. The airport encounter, once a source of anger and discomfort, had become a symbol of ethical courage and leadership in action. Her team was stronger, clients were more loyal, and the public had recognized her commitment to integrity. Monique's company had not only survived the challenge but had emerged more united, more principled, and more respected than ever. In the end, the story of Monique Harris was not just about a single incident or the decision to pull contracts from an airline. It was about the power of values-driven leadership, the importance of accountability, and the courage to act in the face of disrespect. It was a reminder that leaders who prioritize integrity, fairness, and respect can create ripple effects that touch their organization, their industry, and even society at large. Monique's journey demonstrated that challenges, no matter how uncomfortable, could be transformed into opportunities for growth, reflection, and positive change. Her actions had ensured that her company would continue to operate with dignity and purpose, setting a standard for ethical leadership that would endure for years to come.